The fog came in early that evening, the kind that erased the line between water and sky and made the harbor smell like cold iron and old rope. Mara was already on the rocks when she saw the first lantern tip. She'd finished her last tour group an hour ago, 6 retired teachers from the mainland who'd wanted to know the name of every species of periwinkle and had taken photographs of her hands pointing at anemones. She should have gone home. She had soup on the stove and a book she'd been failing to finish for 3 weeks, and the tide was coming in fast, the way it did when the pressure dropped before a storm. But she'd stopped to check on the festival setup because nobody else would, and now 12 paper lanterns strung between cedar posts along the lower seawall were listing hard in the rising water. The lantern display was for the Founders' Day celebration. The harbour master's wife had spent 2 weekends building them from waxed paper and copper wire, and the ceremony wasn't until Saturday. Today was Thursday. The tide wasn't supposed to reach the lower posts, but the storm surge had other ideas, and the nearest post was already leaning, its base sucking loose in the wet sand. Mara pulled off her guide vest, dropped it on a dry rock, and waded in to her knees. She was working on the second post when she heard boots on the wet stone behind her.
"You're gonna lose that one on the end first,"
A voice said. She did not turn around. She knew the voice the way you knew the sound of a boat engine you'd heard 1,000 times, immediately, in the chest, before the mind caught up.
I know which one I'm going to lose, Theo. I'm standing in it.
He was already in the water beside her, reaching past her to brace the leaning post with both hands. He was taller than she remembered, or maybe she had been actively unremembering him for 5 years and had gotten the proportions wrong. He smelled like diesel and sawdust and cold salt air, and his hands were rough where they brushed hers on the cedar post.
"I can hold this one. You get the line on the end."
I see you've arrived with your full suite of opinions.
Mara said, already wading toward the last post. She grabbed the anchor line and pulled it up out of the sand, looping it twice around her wrist. The copper wire connecting the lanterns sang in the wind. The fog had thickened to the point where the seafood shack's lights were just orange smears above the dock, and from somewhere inland she could hear the sound check for Saturday's band, a guitar running up and down a scale, then stopping. They worked without talking for 20 minutes, which was both easier and harder than Mara had expected. They moved well together in the cold water, one of them steadying while the other retied, passing the wire between them with the efficiency of people who had once known how to share a task without narrating it. She had forgotten that, the particular comfort of working alongside someone who anticipated your next move. She had spent 5 years being competent entirely alone, and she had considered that an improvement. They had all 12 lanterns secured to higher posts by the time the water reached the level where it would have swallowed the originals. The lanterns swayed and glowed softly in the fog, copper wire threaded between the posts, paper sides breathing with the wind. Mara climbed back up to the dry rocks and sat down to wring out the hem of her jacket. Theo sat beside her, not close enough to touch, but close enough that she was aware of the warmth coming off him.
The skiff,
she said, before he could.
"My uncle left it to me. It needs work."
I heard. Half the harbor heard. Carl at the fuel dock gave me a full account of the whole condition, including a diagram.
Theo made a low sound that was almost a laugh. The almost laugh undid something small in her chest that she immediately tried to reconstruct.
How long is the work going to take?
"Month. Maybe 2.
And then you'll go back.
She said it like it wasn't a question. She had practice.
"I've been here 3 weeks, Mara."
I know. I've been timing it.
She meant it to land lightly. It did not.
"I come down at low tide."
Theo said. His voice was quiet, the way it always got when he was choosing words carefully.
"Every day. Not for the skiff."
Mara looked at her hands. The lantern wire had left a faint red line across her palm.
The oyster beds are interesting this season. I understand the appeal.
"You haven't changed your tide pool route in 5 years."
It's an excellent route.
"You go out at 7:40 on the morning low, and you come back by the breakwater, and you stop at the big mussel cluster at the end of the 3rd shelf, because that's where the purple urchins are most visible, and you always show the urchins last, because they're the most."
Don't,
Mara said. He stopped. The fog pushed in around them, and the lanterns glowed, and the tide kept coming with its patient indifference to human difficulty.
You left,
she said. Her voice came out steadier than she deserved.
You left, and it wasn't even a dramatic thing. That's the part I kept not being able to explain to people. You just went One conversation and then gone. And I was doing fine, she said. I built the tours. I know this harbor better than anyone. I am fine.
I know you are.
Then why are you looking at me like that?
Because being fine and being okay are two different things, and you know it.
She turned to look at him, which she had been carefully not doing. His face was all fog damp and low lantern light, and there were new lines at the corners of his eyes that had not been there before. He looked like someone who had also been working very hard at fine for a long time.
I thought leaving was the right thing. You had this place and your whole life here, and I thought I was making it easier for you.
That is
Mara said slowly.
genuinely one of the most ridiculous things I have ever heard, and I once had a tourist ask me if the tide pool starfish were decorative.
He laughed then, a real one, and the sound of it hit her somewhere between the ribs. She did not mean to lean into him. The rock was cold and he was warm, and her wet jacket had stopped doing anything useful, and his shoulder was right there, and the lanterns were swaying above the water, and she was so tired of being the most competent and untouched person in any given location. He went very still when she leaned against him, like he was afraid to do anything that would make her move. Then his arm came around her carefully, the way you steadied something you were not yet certain you were allowed to hold. Below them, the harbour water lapped at the rocks with a sound like paper turning. The lowest lantern swayed close to the surface, and its reflection in the dark water was soft and gold, and for a moment the fog thinned just enough to show the lighthouse beacon rotating somewhere to the east.
I missed you.
Mara said.
I want you to understand that I resent having to tell you that, because you should have already known. And also, I'm going to make a joke about it in approximately 40 seconds, so you should take it seriously right now while I mean it straight.
He turned toward her. His free hand came up to her jaw, cold fingers, careful, and she felt his thumb trace the line of her cheekbone like he was learning something by touch that he'd gotten wrong from memory.
I missed you every single day.
He said.
That's the straight version.
She kissed him before he could add anything to it. She'd always preferred action over elaboration, and his mouth was warm against the cold of the fog, and he kissed her back like he'd been rehearsing the specific angle of it. One of his hands stayed at her jaw, and the other gripped her shoulder, and behind them the last lantern rose slightly in the wind and cast light across the wet rocks in a shifting amber pattern. When they broke apart, Mara looked at the water for a moment. The tide had taken the lower shelf entirely now. If they hadn't moved the lanterns, half of them would be floating toward the open harbour.
We saved them.
She said.
We did.
She could feel him watching the side of her face the way he used to, with that particular patient attention that had always made her feel both seen and deeply inconvenienced.
Carl is going to tell everyone he saw us out here.
Carl was watching from the fuel dock before I even got my boots off.
He has binoculars.
I know.
He's going to be insufferable.
Yes.
The last lantern caught a gust and rose on its wire, pulling taut, and for a second it hung there above the water like something trying to decide whether to stay. Then the wind eased and it settled back, glowing steadily in the fog.
Will you show me the tide pools tomorrow?
Theo asked. She looked at him then, fully, without the joke ready and waiting in her throat.
I start at 6.
She stood and picked up her guide vest and didn't look away when she said it, which Theo, who had spent 5 years getting her expressions wrong from 1,000 miles away, understood to mean she was keeping the door open, not just to the tide pools, to the harbour in the cold morning, and all of it, offered plainly, with her hands full of salt-stiff nylon and her hair damp with fog, which was exactly how she gave anything real, without ceremony, without taking it back. He was at the breakwater by 5:45. He brought coffee in paper cups from the seafood shack, which did not open until 7, but whose owner owed him a favor involving a bilge pump, and he sat on the cold stone and watched the fog begin its slow retreat from the water, the lighthouse beam still turning above it, steady as a promise no one had broken yet.